Hi everybody, if you're new to the channel, my name is Ben and I'm a former JP Morgan investment banking analyst. So normally I actually make videos about investing, but today I wanted to actually talk about why I left finance and share a little bit of my reflections on what I learned from leaving the industry. Alright, so let's jump straight into it. Let me just start off by talking about why I left. Now, first off, to provide a little bit of context, I joined the JP Morgan San Francisco healthcare team in 2015, where I covered a lot of biotech, medtech, and digital health companies. I worked there for a little more than 2.5 years, and although investment banking has a pretty poor reputation, I actually had a pretty positive experience. Now in banking, it's often that you work 80 to 100 hours a week, and so it's hard to have a really good lifestyle. But I kind of went into the experience thinking that I knew what I was signing myself up for. I knew I was going to be working hard, and I felt like I was learning and growing a lot throughout my 2.5 years when I was working at JP Morgan. I wasn't necessarily interested in healthcare, but the group had a really great culture and really strong deal flow. And so that's kind of why I decided to join that group. But back to the main topic, the reason I left banking involves a pretty personal reason and story, but I don't mind sharing it publicly in the hopes that it eventually helps someone, whoever you are that is watching this video. So basically in 2017, my mom was diagnosed with ALS, which is the same disease that Stephen Hawking had, and it's a terminal illness in which all your muscles start to slowly deteriorate over time. Now, I won't go into this too much because I really don't want to make this video like a sob story, but basically, that diagnosis made me rethink about my entire life and what was truly important to me. When you work in banking or any kind of high-paying job, it's really easy to get lost in the mindset of thinking a lot about compensation and getting used to a certain lifestyle. And I really fell into that whole mindset of needing to make a lot of money and holding on to jobs, not necessarily because I was super passionate about them, but just because I was used to living a certain way. I know this might be of interest to some of you guys watching, and so just to be totally transparent and kind of give you guys some information that maybe most people in banking wouldn't tell you. My second year out of banking, including some investment gains, I reported around $170,000 in my income. So second year out of college, that was how much I was making. And over the next few years, I was thinking of joining either a private equity firm or a hedge fund where the compensation can easily reach in the $200,000 to $300,000 in annual income. Joining one of those industries was really tempting for me, but as I said, when my mom got sick, it made me really recalibrate and think about what was important to me. And I always had two really big lifelong dreams that I wanted to pursue ever since I was young. The first one was backpacking across the world, and then the second thing was to start my own business. So in the beginning of 2018, I quit my job and started a 6-month journey where I was backpacking across South America, Asia, and Australia. And throughout that time, I was also kind of thinking about the next business that I wanted to start building. The company I ended up starting was called Aesthetic Studios, and it was a fashion brand where we partnered with artists pretty much from all over the world. We had some artists from Russia, Chile, the UK, and the US. And our goal was to just create really high quality garments with artists, kind of hoping to be like the Nike for creatives. I'll leave a link in the description below, but to be completely transparent, I'm really not trying to push any products. I'm not working on the brand anymore. But if you want to check out what I worked on, just feel free to check it out. So that's why I left investment banking. It was really to just kind of pursue my own passions. I would say my experience is pretty abnormal. Most of the analysts that I knew went into industry jobs or the buy side in like private equity or hedge funds. Now, in my opinion, there are 3 normal quote unquote reasons why analysts leave their jobs in investment banking. And the first one is that the lifestyle just gets pretty unsustainable over a long period of time. Working 80 to 100 hours a week, that's bad in itself, but you also have to factor in you're oftentimes canceling plans with friends, not able to spend a lot of time with family, and you can't go on as many vacations as you want to, or even when you do go, sometimes you do have to do a lot of work during those vacations. So that lifestyle is just something that's really hard to keep pushing through over a long period of time. The second reason is that the work tends to get really repetitive. Over time, if you're working 70 to 100 hours a week, pretty much in anything in life, then you'll start to get really good at it, but it might start to get a little bit boring unless that's what you're like born to do. And for most analysts, they're not born to just crank out financial models and build presentations, right? Some people eventually want to pursue other things in life. And so a big reason that a lot of analysts leave is because once they become an associate, you're still doing a lot of financial modeling and presentation building, a little less so, and you are starting to meet with clients a lot more, and you're not doing all of the grunt work yourself, but banking tends to be kind of the same thing when you keep doing deal after deal. The third and related reason to what I just kind of talked about is that you eventually want to gain some more exposure to different industries or gain a new set of skills. And so that's why a lot of analysts leave in order to pursue an industry job or go into the buy side. With that said, now that I've left banking for a few years, I've had a lot of time to reflect, and I just wanted to share two really important lessons that I kind of picked up. The first one is pretty cliche, but it really is that money is not everything. I grew up in a solid middle-class family, and my dad was an entrepreneur, and there were times when business was going really well and life was pretty good, but there were also times when the lights wouldn't turn on because the electricity bill wasn't being paid. And I remember back in 2008 when my dad's business kind of crashed and burned, there was a guy who came in the middle of the night who took our car away because it wasn't being paid for. I think all of this is what really kind of pushed and motivated me to work really hard to land a really high paying job out of college. And that's probably a big reason I chose investment banking, beyond me also kind of being interested in finance and financial modeling. And so when I was in banking, I was making decent money, buying a lot of things that I wanted, living in a decent apartment in San Francisco. And when I left, my life kind of did a huge 180 where I was losing a lot of money because I was investing in the business. In addition to that, my lifestyle also changed pretty dramatically. I went from being able to buy pretty much any meal I wanted when I was at JP Morgan, for example. And as an entrepreneur, I had to save money wherever I could. So I was eating like the same Costco chicken and spinach meal for weeks on end, maybe varying it up a little bit here and there. And sometimes even when my friends asked me if I wanted to hang out, sometimes I would say no because I didn't want to spend money going out. I was also driving this really old, beat up 2002 Toyota minivan, which honestly was like kind of embarrassing for me, even though I'm not really a materialistic guy, but it was just so beat up and disgusting. But anyway, I think that's a part of the whole entrepreneurial lifestyle that, looking back to now, I think it's pretty hilarious, and I enjoyed even kind of just going through the struggle of that whole startup life. And so I don't really have any regrets about any of that. I just think that a lot of times entrepreneurship life tends to be or sound really glamorous, but in actuality, there's a lot of like grinding and small details that are not really shared because you normally hear a lot about the success. And what's also really important to note is that I felt so passionate about what I was working on, and each day for 2+ years, I really never felt like I was working, quote unquote, on work. It really just felt like a fun project where I was meeting with artists, talking to suppliers, negotiating costs, just learning so much about a lot of things in business that I just could never have learned in banking or through my business degree. It was such a valuable experience for me, and I really have zero regrets, even though it kind of set me back a little bit financially. Okay, not a little bit, it set me back a lot. Now, I know I probably could have stayed in finance, saved up for a little bit, and maybe started a business when I was a little bit older, but it just seems like for me, a lot of the people I speak to that are in their late 20s or 30s and 40s, when I talk to them, it gets harder and harder to actually just risk more, because when you get to that age, you might have a family and kids, and at that point, starting a business is really difficult. And so that's why I have no regrets for starting Aesthetic Studios. And this kind of leads me to my second point. The second thing I reflected on a lot was my perspective of short-term risk versus long-term risk. Back when I was in banking and also in college, I feel like a lot of my perspective was really focused on the short term. In the next few years, what do I need to do to get this job or this promotion? And I kind of just left everything else in my life beyond the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years, just in the back of my head thinking everything will eventually work out and I'll eventually pursue all of the dreams that I have in my life. I also placed this really heavy emphasis and value in the short-term risk of giving up what I had in finance, starting a business because of the potential opportunity cost. And that really changed for me when, as I mentioned, my mom was diagnosed, because I started doing this mental thought experiment in my head where I was just thinking, if I were in her shoes, if I was 55 years old, looking back in my life, would I regret not starting my business or pursuing any of the dreams that I had. And that was the kind of mental exercise I kept thinking to myself as throughout the year of 2017, I was debating whether or not I should quit. And so when I did this mental exercise, every time I thought of it, I would just think, if I was 55 or something like that, sitting on a porch and reflecting on my life, if I had never started a business, I just felt like I would be filled with so much regret. And seeing my mom lose control of her limbs one by one, all of it was just not only heartbreaking, but also just made me realize that life is super, super fragile, and the short-term risks that I was thinking about was not really as important as the long-term risk of never doing something that I truly cared about and feeling like I never really followed my gut. All right, so I feel like I kind of rambled on, and I don't honestly know if any of you guys want to hear about this stuff, but I hope it was helpful to some of you in some way. And if there's some other kind of topics or question you guys have that you feel like you want me to cover, then feel free to leave it in the comments below. I also want to caveat everything by saying that I don't actually advocate for everyone just quitting and pursuing whatever they want without a plan or really thinking things through in some way. But I really do think that if deep down in your gut, something is telling you that you need to do something, then I think it's really important to focus on listening in on what that little voice in your head is telling you and making some moves in order to pursue whatever that is. But of course, I'll leave that decision to you. I'm just a random guy on YouTube, and so you don't have to take any of my advice, but that's just something, or this all is just something I wanted to share. And so thanks so much for tuning in, and as usual, I'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.